That evening I was sitting and drinking coffee when my son called and asked why every card was being declined. He couldn't pay for his mother-in-law's birthday dinner at the restaurant. Everyone is laughing at us. I don't have cash, Mom, please handle this for me. Ciro's desperation made me feel satisfied, a feeling I never thought I would have toward my own child, and if you want to understand why my son had to ask me to pay for that dinner, please listen to this entire story. My name is Mosey, 65, a widow in the most literal sense, because the man I once called my husband followed the call of love and left me and our child when Ciro was still little, leaving me with a cafe in the town center and a will as hard as stone. Years later, when people said I was strong, I only smiled. Being strong means that at every dawn you unlock the door, wipe the tables, straighten the chalkboard menu, pretend you don't hear your heart ring hollow, and at night, after you lock up, you quietly count small change until you stop fearing tomorrow. Before Ciro married Dima, our life wasn't rich but it had order. I sold coffee, waffles, and cream of pumpkin soup until noon, baked another batch of almond cookies in the afternoon. Regulars called me Sister Mosey, though my hair was graying, and Ciro worked for a company in the city, leaving early and returning late but still dropping by the cafe, sitting by the window with a cold latte and telling stories as if the leftover drops of coffee could measure the future. Dima appeared from the marketing department, her voice eager, her eyes bright like a streak of sunlight on the tiled floor, and I thought maybe destiny could soften. But then the economy began to plunge, both of them lost their jobs in the same week, carrying stacks of resumes to knock on many doors and no one took them, and the rented house at $800 a month suddenly became a number that turned your hand cold to the touch. Mom, I'm late on the payment, can you cover $500 on the credit card? Ciro said one evening as rain ticked on the roof, and Dima texted with a voice as light as milk foam, Mom, I accidentally ordered a bag, $800. Could you front me? I'll pay you back as soon as things settle. And because my cafe was still crowded, revenue steady, I nodded, soothing myself with 2 words, family. I saw their eyes sink after being unemployed for so long, and I feared their future would bog down in marshy mud. So I sat down seriously to talk and suggested, how about we start a business so you won't drift? At first both hesitated, reasons piling up like a tablecloth tugged and never reaching the edge. But when I said, I'll provide capital, the sudden nods became firm. I poured $30,000 for Ciro to open a pastry shop because since childhood he had stood beside me staring unblinking at the oven flame, and $20,000 for Dima to open a flower shop right next to my cafe because she loved flowers enough to recite their scientific names, each stem placed like a story. Everything started as quickly as pulling a lever. I took them to a carpenter to build the counters, asked a friend in printing to do the branding, bought a small espresso machine for the pastry counter, and hired the intern who had helped at my cafe to support the books. The first week with the soft opening sign, I stood on the sidewalk, inhaled the scent of melting butter. The cedar from wreaths in Dima's hands turned the street into a park somewhere in Europe, and I smiled like someone who believes in the sweat of labor. Then at the end of the first month they reported a loss. I said, that's normal, because customers need time to know a new shop. I poured in more capital, guided them on advertising, showed them how to run sampling offers, and by the 3rd month both reported a profit. Mom, we did it. Ciro hugged me like a child, and Dima sent me a dozen photos of wedding bouquets selling fast. I breathed out, thinking I could finally sleep without dreams. But life often hides a needle in the hand that's holding on, and once profits arrived their spending sprang up like a coil. Ciro wanted to move because the old place is cramped. The new apartment at $1,200 a month closer to downtown. Dima said, we need to appear proper in the circle to do business. And gradually it was clothes, photo shoots, dinners at restaurants with tablecloths, a vacation in Thailand the 2 of them took without me, and of course the final bill was sent to me with the excuse, we're still struggling, please help. And I, the one who had dared to fight an entire winter, softened before that honey-laced voice. One noon, during a lull, the bank app showed a deduction of $800 for a pair of limited edition shoes. The note, I bought a pair for you too, Mom. Please pay for me now. I stood frozen, the row of cappuccino cups waiting to be washed before me, and yet all I could see was a number. From $300,000 saved over more than 10 years, my account had around $20,000 left, not because disaster struck but because of 1,000 small cuts, each, just this once, each relationship building, dinner, each relaxation to work better, trip. I closed early that day, sat alone with the books and a dull pencil, added and subtracted until my hands ached, and suddenly heard it as Clearly as crystal glasses touching, I had been wrong. The next morning I revoked their access to the account, blocked the supplementary cards, called Ciro and Dima over, and on the table were a pot of black tea and a stack of invoices I pinned together like pinning a wound. Everything stops here. I'll transfer this rental to your names. I'll move out, and I will stop all further investment. The pastry shop and the flower shop are yours. You two must stand on your own feet. Ciro spoke first. Mom, everything is going fine. Dima pressed her lips. Doing this is killing us, and I spoke slowly. I am only ending the killing of me, the ruin. You are adults. Live like adults. They left. The door creaked like a small curse. A few weeks later, messages piled up. Mom, we're celebrating my mom's birthday. $400. Please pay. I replied with a single word, no, and that night they came to my house, knocked, one pleaded, one cursed, feelings scraping the wood like nails on brick. I didn't open. The next day they called again, voices lowered, begging me to return to the family. I turned the ringer off and walked to the community room where the senior group in the neighborhood did their exercises, and there, among the folding chairs and hoarse laughter, I met stories darker than mine. Mrs. Ruth offhandedly mentioned the money her son-in-law took. Mr. Jeffrey smiled awkwardly as he talked about a grandson who borrowed a car and pawned it at a casino. I felt less alone and thanked heaven for waking me up early. I made an appointment with a lawyer and wrote a will, 90% of my savings to the fund I established for lonely elders in this neighborhood, people who have had to endure in silence, and 10% for Ciro with the single condition that he take care of his own life. I called 3 neighbors who had quietly placed a hand on my shoulder in late evenings, Mrs. Ruth, Ms. Lynn, and Mr. Armand, and said, let's take a trip, and we boarded a train to a coastal city, slept to the sound of waves, ate grilled oysters, and talked about the past as if it were only a thin booklet. While I was learning to breathe slower, Ciro's pastry shop and Dima's flower shop began to slide. I heard the flower supplier complain about not being paid, saw customer comments about wilted flowers delivered late, and one evening Ciro called like a spent man, Mom, save me. I didn't pick up. Afterward they sent long texts, sometimes calling me heartless, sometimes pleading, please don't make it hard for us. And once Dima wrote, if you don't help, consider yourself no longer a mother, a sentence like a stone thrown at a window, leaving silence and slanted sunlight on an old family photo. I still watched, still walked past their shops in the early morning before pulling open my cafe door, looked through the glass and saw the stand mixer like a beached whale, saw the pot of petunias set askew and no one straightening it, and I knew no one can straighten another person's spine. Nearly 3 months later, Ciro stood on my porch, thinner, with sleepless eyes, holding his cap like a young man who didn't yet know how to lie. Mom, I'm sorry, I was greedy, I chased appearances, I disrespected your work. Even if you don't forgive me I still need to say it. I invited him in, poured water, listened, and when he asked me to go back to how things were, I shook my head. No going back. I can't be your backup account anymore, but I will listen. Ciro lowered his head and said he would change, and strangely, from that day, I saw him in the kitchen earlier, cleaning the mixer until it shone, cutting butter to the exact gram, and in the late afternoon I saw Dima before the mirror at the counter checking her sleeves, then tying bouquets with simple brown twine instead of fussy ribbons. Not long after, the whole family came to my house with a basket of flowers without ornamentation, just white chrysanthemums and mint leaves, placing it on the kitchen table like setting down a truthful sentence. Mom, Dima said, her voice for the first time not wriggling, I'm sorry for what I said and what I took. Ciro added, I'm sorry for turning you into a bank. They shared news that suddenly brightened the house. We're having a baby. Next weekend we'll hold a small party. Please come, I faltered, then nodded, not because a baby can fix everything, but because it's a chance for adults to relearn the basics. In the days that followed I brewed coffee as always, but the machine sounded gentler. Regulars asked how things were. I told them briefly, not painting it rosy or black, only saying we were learning to stand still, and to stand straight. The night before the party, Dima called, Mom, I want to arrange a vase for the main table myself. I want it simple, like the ones you put in the cafe, I said. Choose seasonal flowers and don't try to impress anyone but yourself. Then I hung up, picked up the counter cloth, and felt my hand stop shaking. The next day I arrived at a smaller apartment than the $1,200 place they once demanded, cramped but clean, a few cheap prints on the wall, 2 loaves of milk bread Ciro baked, the vanilla sent right on time, Dima's vase so simple it was cute, the guests not many, some new business friends, some kind neighbors, and the fabric shop owner from the corner. Ciro moved about refilling drinks without being prompted, and Dima, with her round belly, walked slowly, sat to catch her breath, then stood up to arrange cookies on a plate. I sat at the back, listening to them talk about the workweek as if talking about good habits. No mention of restaurants with tablecloths, no mention of connections, only a wedding cake order and an aunt who liked red velvet flowers. After the meal, Ciro took me to the narrow balcony overlooking an alley lined with mint in tin cans and said, "Mom, I recalculated the budget, cancelled a streaming package, switched the gym to the basic plan, we moved back to a cheaper apartment, and we set a goal to save $200 a month in an emergency fund." I nodded, hearing pencil marks sharpen. Dima came over, took my hand, and whispered, "Mom, I know you made a will." I was sad at first, but now I understand you're teaching us how to be adults. Then she smiled, a plain smile, the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes like the veins on a pear blossom after rain. I came home later than usual, turned on the porch light, sat in the wooden chair, and for the first time in months I didn't open the ledger. I looked into the dark backyard where the jasmine was blooming, thought about the fund for lonely elders I had finished registering, thought about the 3 neighbors who had scheduled another short trip during leaf fall season, thought about the first cry I would soon hear from a child carrying the surname of a man who left and given a name by 2 youngsters learning the trade of adulthood. The next morning the cafe was crowded. The young barista asked, "Are you tired, ma'am?" I shook my head, my hand gliding over the machine, espresso running black and bright, and I remembered the bank alert for that $800, the note, "I bought one for you," remembered the remaining 20,000, remembered how 300,000 had once been a fortress, and then I smiled very faintly, like smiling at a friend who had gone far, because the past, even scratched, is proof that we swam and did not drown. At the end of the day I closed the ledger, turned off the lights, and in the cool dark of the living room I sat down to write a few lines to the future, that I kept the house of self-respect, that if one day Ciro calls again I will answer, but I will not transfer money. I will bring a basket of warm toast, hug my grandchild, ask my son how much he saved this week, tell my daughter-in-law that the vase the other day was beautiful because it was just enough, and tell the little one a nameless story about how a woman learned to put the period in the right place. And the front door? It still opens by day and locks by night, like any decent door in Europe or America or in the small town where I live, and maybe that's enough for me to know I'm still walking toward the light, and the rest, including forgiving completely and where that 10% will go at the right time, I'll save for some unexpected day when the wind on the porch changes direction, the smell of coffee carries the sound of a baby crying at the alley's mouth, and someone knocks with 2 even beats, no pleading, no command, just the rhythm of people who have learned to use their own hands. I woke earlier than usual on the day they forecast showers. The sky stacked thin scarves upon itself, the light filtered through the glass more dimly, and the cafe opened in the smell of rain on the corrugated roof of the shop next door. I made myself an Americano and sat in the chair near the door, watching people pull their arms into their coats and hurry past the frontage. My phone buzzed once, a short message from Ciro, "Mom, Dima's showing signs. I'm taking her to the hospital." I replied, "Stay calm. Breathe. Text me when you arrive," then tidied the tray of fresh baked bread as if tidying away a nameless sliver of excitement. By noon the rain eased. I taped a small note, "Out for 1 hour," on the door, handed the counter to the barista, and took a ride to the hospital. White hallways, the smell of disinfectant, the sound of rubber-soled shoes. Ciro met me at the entrance, eyes red from lack of sleep, hands shaking but mouth trying to smile. "Mom," they said, "a few more hours." I placed my hand on his shoulder, like dropping an anchor onto the tile. We sat on a cold plastic bench and talked about small things, how the party vase had lacked a few sprigs of green, how the wedding client for the weekend wanted more frosting, each story pulling time along a little. When the nurse came out and called Dima's name, I saw Ciro jump up, flustered like his first day at work, and I told myself to let him go first, because there are doors where the old must stand aside so the young can walk through. The baby was born on an afternoon thin as thread, her cries spread through the waiting hall and then vanished like a bird diving into leaves. They let me see through the glass, a pink face, tiny hands like 2 clam shells. I heard myself exhale. "What's the name?" I asked through the crack in the door. "We think her name will be Cloud," Dima said, tired but clear, and I smiled softly at a name that weighed less than any debt, that didn't appear on any invoice, just a cloud sliding across the sky. In the days that followed, my schedule added a habit. Every late afternoon I brought a small tray of bread and a few jars of yogurt to the kids' apartment, set them on the kitchen counter, washed a few bowls, and held Cloud for a while so Dima could nap. I didn't ask about money, didn't mention debts. I asked how many naps Cloud had, asked whether Dima had eaten lunch, asked Ciro if he remembered to preheat the oven before mixing dough. Occasionally, when they spoke about diaper costs, I only listened, letting my silence be a curtain for them to add and subtract for themselves. One evening Ciro sat next to me on the window sill, looking out at the empty alley. "Mom, I'm afraid I'll slip again." I said, "If you slip, know how to stand up. This time is different because you know where you're slipping." He nodded, his shoulders sagging as if a backpack had been taken off. The fund for lonely elders started as smoothly as a freshly oiled machine. The permit was approved. I organized the first meeting in the neighborhood community room, set up a long table, brewed a pot of tea, and arranged a plate of butter cookies. Mrs. Ruth brought a notebook listing those in need. Mr. Armand called a group of young volunteers from the nearby church. We agreed on 2 home visiting sessions a week and 1 community dinner on the last Friday of the month. I looked around the room and saw white heads and bony hands that had been used to counting small change now discussing which electric cooker was cheapest and durable, how to make tracking slip so support wouldn't be duplicated. I felt a calm joy that even the busiest cafe couldn't give me, the feeling of your money turning into hot meals, new blankets, and light bulbs changed on time. Ciro's pastry shop found its rhythm. He hung a whiteboard, dividing each day into 3 boxes: mix, bake, deliver. Whenever she had a free hand, Dima cut little thank you cards from craft paper, carefully wrote, "Thank you for supporting our little bakery," and tucked them into the boxes. I dropped by a few mornings, stood in the corner, said nothing, and listened to the spatula tap the bowl, the oven beep, the rustle of paper bags. One day I saw Ciro pause for a long time before the sugar shelf, granulated, brown, powdered, then switched to weighing butter with the slightest hesitation. I knew he was recalculating every gram, like recalculating an old habit. Dima had hard days. Dark circles under her eyes, hands chapped from washing bottles, clouds crying tightening everything like a stretched string. One rainy afternoon she called, her voice with a little pebble stuck in it, "Mom, I'm not doing well." I came. The kitchen was messy, the window fogged. Dima sat on the floor by the bassinet, hair tangled, eyes red. I put the kettle on, picked up Cloud, and hummed a tune I don't remember learning. When Dima had settled, I sat next to my daughter-in-law. "Not being okay is normal," I said, "saying you're not okay is brave." Dima leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I'm afraid I'm not doing well enough." I said, "Cloud needs a good enough mother, not a perfect one." "Your flower shop too." The next day I saw a new note on the flower shop shelf: "We accept imperfect flowers, as long as they're honest." A customer saw the note, smiled, and bought an extra bouquet. On a Friday night the fund's community dinner happened in the shared kitchen. We made white bean soup, toasted bread, and cucumber salad. Ciro came early with 2 trays of garlic bread. Dima stopped by with Cloud for a moment and left. Mrs. Ruth sat beside me and said she had convinced Mr. Jeffrey to get his eyes checked, with the fund paying part. "He can read house numbers again," she smiled. I looked around, bowls moving from hand to hand, talk blending with the clink of ladles on pots, a coat hung on the back door. I thought about the 300,000 that once sat still in an account, and about the steaming dinners before me. Money can become many things, but it turns out becoming warmth is the neatest joy. A message came on a sunny noon: "Mom, I got my first big order, 100 boxes of mini mooncakes for a company event." I'm a bit shaky. I texted back, "Break it into tasks. Cross off each one. Don't add anything last minute." That night, Ciro sent a photo, the counter full of cartons, brown twine, labels in straight lines. I zoomed in and saw one label slightly crooked. I laughed to myself and didn't reply. The next morning Ciro stopped by the cafe and set a box in front of me. "This one has the crooked label. I set it aside to give you." I burst out laughing, thinking the boy learns fast. A month passed, and the kids' apartment began to smell like a home. the scent of cheap soap, clean diapers, butter baking, and fallen chrysanthemum petals. They replaced the old sofa with an armchair picked up at the thrift market. Dima reupholstered it in dotted blue. Ciro hung a one-hand clock on the wall. I asked why not buy a new one and he said, "This one runs half a minute slow each hour," reminding me not to hurry. I nodded. Some philosophies take a lifetime to learn, and they started to grasp them just in time to stumble. One evening Ciro brought me a sheet of paper. "Mom, here's the monthly budget. We saved $300. We also have a small buffer." I looked at his handwriting: rent, electricity, water, diapers, milk, flour, butter, sugar, flowers, wrapping paper, even a line for coffee with Mom, $5. I touched that number lightly, smiled, and said, "I'll pay for that line." He shook his head. "No, we'll pay for that." Somehow that sentence warmed the whole kitchen. Sometimes the past returned like a rattling garbage truck at 2 in the morning. One day Claudia, Dima's mother, came to the cafe, sat by the window, ordered a cappuccino and didn't touch it. She looked at me for a long time and said, "I was wrong to push them. I wanted Dima to live easily." I answered, "Wanting your child to live easily is instinct. Teaching your child to go through hardship is love that needs training." She nodded, her gaze falling into the air between 2 cups. "I want to see my grandchild," she said. "You're the grandmother, the door is open," I replied, and in my head another door opened quietly too, not because she had changed completely, but because I no longer shut everything out of fear. One windy afternoon the cafe's old wooden sign chipped at a corner. I set up a ladder to take it down, but Ciro ran over and said, "Let me." He unscrewed each bolt, wiped dust from the edge, laid the sign on the table, sanded carefully, repainted the border, waited for it to dry, and hung it back up as carefully as hanging a mended memory. When the sign returned to its place, sunlight cut through the word coffee into a long stripe on the tile. I closed my eyes for a second and heard Cloud laughing somewhere at the end of the alley, heard Dima call, "Ciro, remember to take the bread out," heard Mrs. Ruth ring the bell at apartment 7 to deliver soup for dinner, heard the one-hand clock tick half a minute slow each hour. That night I opened my notebook not to record numbers but to write another list, things I want to teach Cloud when she's old enough to understand. That money is a tool, not a crutch. That, "I'm sorry," is an action, not just a sentence. That the most beautiful vase sometimes needs only 3 stems and a clear jar. That bread won't burn if you stay 5 more minutes by the oven. That lonely elders don't need pity, they need regularity. That no one has the right to turn your love into a monthly bill. I made bullet points to the 10th and stopped because the ink was running out. I put the pen away, stood up, and went to the porch. The sky was thick with woolly clouds. I imagined little Cloud a few years from now running across the porch, canvas shoes dirty with earth, holding a white chrysanthemum, asking me, "Grandma, why do clouds drift?" I will answer, because the wind pushes them. But in the end clouds still find their sky. On Sunday morning Ciro texted, "Mom, we want to cook lunch at your place today. We'll bring the food. Please don't do anything." I read it, my heart fluttering like a leaf falling at just the right moment. I set the table, chose my favorite tablecloth, the one with a small stain in the corner from a tea spill years ago. I didn't cover it. I thought there's no need to hide stains. They remind me I lived truly. I opened the door and took a long breath of sunshine. Then came a knock, 2 even beats, no pleading, no command. I went out, hand on the knob, and turned it gently. The door opened onto a simple frame, my son carrying a bag of groceries, my daughter-in-law holding a laughing baby, behind them a bouquet that was just enough. They looked at me as if seeing that fragile luck people don't dare to name. I smiled and stepped back to make room. The rest, lunch, stories, looks, comfortable silences, walked into the house on their own, the way a new day walks into life no matter what name you call it. That lunch was simple enough to be beautiful. Ciro spread the cloth, sliced bread, set a cast-iron pan in the middle of the table like a small hearth that everyone gathered around. Dima held Cloud, then after laying her in the carry cot arranged the salad, greens, roasted almonds, a few slices of orange. I sat opposite the window, the place I had sat for years, saw my shadow layered over my children and grandchild on the glass, and felt peace. When we finished eating, Ciro washed the dishes without being told, Dima wiped the table, and I only stood drying each glass one by one, thinking, sometimes happiness is simply everyone taking responsibility for their share. Late in the afternoon, Ciro hesitantly handed me a brown envelope. I opened a new account for Cloud, $20 a month. It's little, but regular. I want you to keep the passbook. I took it, the cardstock dry and warm. I'll keep it, I said, and I'll also deposit, but I'll deposit to the Elderly Alone Fund as a promise to myself. Cloud's account, let that be yours. Learn the feeling of regularity. Ciro nodded, the nod of someone who understood the current beneath the numbers. The next week Claudia stopped by without notice. She stood on the porch holding a bunch of purple irises and spoke without the knife hidden behind her back. I'd like to help watch Cloud one afternoon a week, however the two of them arrange it. I looked at Dima. She hesitated for a second, then nodded. I gave Claudia a small sheet listing Cloud's routine by hour. Just follow this, I said, the rest, spoiling, is up to you. She smiled, and for the first time her smile reached her eyes. The Elderly Alone Fund entered its third month and met its first challenge. The neighborhood community room announced roof repairs. No kitchen for 2 weeks. I sat with Mrs. Ruth and Mr. Armand and sketched a quick replacement plan. We break it up, I suggested, each home cooks a portion, and at night we gather in the courtyard behind my cafe and distribute immediately. On the first distribution night the sky hung a crescent moon like a coat hook. People came to receive soup through the stringlet yard, each saying hello. Some offered hands to carry pots. I noticed a young man standing in the corner in an old hoodie, staring. I handed him a bowl. He held it and froze. I just want to help. I gave him a glove and gestured toward the kitchen. He came the following nights too. His name was Matt, 2 alleys away, newly unemployed. I told him to slice bread. He sliced evenly, every piece the same. When you get a new job, go, I said. When you're free, come. He nodded, eyes lit with the recognition of being useful. The bakery received a second corporate event order, this time a big one. A broker came speaking shiny words, showcase, influencer, exposure. It must be rushed, 3 days, he said, payment later. I saw Ciro pinch his fingers lightly. He looked to me with his eyes. I shook my head very slightly. Then Ciro looked straight at the man. Sorry, we don't take orders paid afterward. We take orders that fit our capacity. 3 days isn't enough to guarantee quality. The broker shrugged and left as quickly as he arrived. When the door closed, Ciro leaned against the counter and exhaled long. I'm scared and relieved. I said, that feeling is called growing up. The shop was quieter than usual that night, but Ciro and Dima closed on time and went home to eat together. No order is worth trading away clarity for. One morning my cafe's landlord texted that he would raise the rent at the beginning of next year. I read it twice, my Americano cooling. I didn't want to use the fund's money for anything personal, that boundary is iron. I met him at the cafe. He was older than last time, but still talked by counting on his fingers. Costs are up, Ms. Mosey. I'm struggling too. I nodded, not complaining. Let's sign 3 years, I proposed. I'll accept part of the increase. In exchange you redo the roof, replace the old pipes, and allow me to hang lights on the porch. I'll pay for the lights. He looked at me and nodded. You're the most punctual payer on this street. I smiled, that's how I sleep well. We shook hands. I went back, pulled an espresso, drank it in one go, and felt the bitterness travel down my throat like a clear straight line. Dima launched a service called Flowers for Enough, not bouquets to show off, but small arrangements for the kitchen table, window, desk. She photographed each vase with window light only, no filters. The first caption read, Flowers for a Just Enough Life. Unexpectedly, many subscribed. Someone messaged, I don't need flowers to flaunt online. I need something that makes me want to linger a bit after washing dishes. Dima read it, smiled, and wrote herself a note, deliver every Monday morning so they start the week decently. After a few weeks of babysitting, Claudia began bringing simple dishes she cooked: chicken porridge, squash soup, baked corn cakes. She left them on the stove with a note, for when you're tired. One afternoon she sat at the kitchen bar in Ciro's home, watching her daughter nurse, then said, "I'm sorry I taught you that money was the only measure to soothe fear." Dima said nothing and rested her head on her mother's shoulder. I stood in the corner, pretending to polish a jar, and heard them set something new between them, not a debt, but a thin, honest bridge. News came like a leaf drifting onto the porch. The man who left me and my child years ago had died in a far-off city. No one told me. I learned by chance from an acquaintance. There was no funeral where I could stand at the very back, no final letter. I sat behind the counter and looked at my hands, the veins like roads I had traveled alone. Ciro came, looked into my eyes, and didn't ask. He set a hot cup of tea before me and stood still. Silence is also a kind of maturity. That night I wrote in Cloud's notebook, "Some people go and never turn back. Child, you need not tie your life to anyone's footsteps. Tie it to what you do decently every day." The season changed, leaves began to yellow. The cafe hung porch lights, afternoons softened as before. Matt, the young man helping in the fund's kitchen, said he'd found a job at an electronics store. "I'll still come Friday nights," he said. "As long as there's a spot for me to slice bread." "There always is," I replied. The fund held a small fundraiser, no drums and trumpets, just a night of poetry and guitar. Ciro baked almond cookies, Dima set low vases, guests sat on wooden chairs and nodded along. When I spoke about the home visits, the applause rose small but sure. Someone placed an envelope into the box. I didn't count it right away. I knew what I needed to count was the number of dinners delivered to doorways on time. One night Cloud had a mild fever. Dima panicked, Ciro flustered. I came, felt the baby's forehead, showed them how to bring the fever down, and reminded them to call the doctor if it didn't by morning. "Now do something normal," I said, "go eat." I held Cloud and quietly sang the lullaby my mother once sang. When I reached "sleep well," I suddenly felt the old resentment melt like thawing ice. Not because anyone untied it for me, but because enough time had passed for my hands to know how to let go. The next morning Dima texted, "Cloud's fever is down. Thank you for teaching us to stay calm." Old days still cast their shadows sometimes. A former customer, the one who once encouraged Ciro to borrow more to open a second location, stopped by and said, "Now's the time to expand. You have to seize the opportunity." Ciro invited him to sit and poured tea. "I'm seizing different opportunities, the chance to sleep enough, to watch my daughter grow, to owe no one." The man scoffed, "You'll fall behind." Ciro replied, "I choose to stand firm." I stood behind the partition, listening, and smiled. The answer didn't need flourish, it stood with a new kind of muscle. Winter arrived on a draft through the doorframe. I changed the menu, added hot chocolate, cut the fraps. The porch lights glowed warmer. One evening the whole family came when the cafe was quiet and sat in a row. Ciro took out a leather-bound notebook. "Mom, we wrote 4 things we want to keep. Let me read them." He read, 1. Regular over fast. 2. Enough over flashy. 3. Pay now over long debt. 4. Family over face. I said, "Add a 5th, fix it when you mess up." Dima laughed and wrote it in the margin. Cloud drummed her hands on the tabletop as if in agreement. That night I checked the porch lights one last time, touched the repainted sign, and listened to the wind ripple through the curtains. In my pocket was a scrap I'd written at noon. "Tomorrow, call Mrs. Ruth about Mr. Jeffrey's eyes, send flowers to the old lady at number 12, check the cafe gutter, book the plumber." I added a line, "Buy Cloud a knit hat." Then I folded the paper and put it away. Some lists never end, and that's a good thing, as long as we know what we'll do in the morning. The next morning, just as I opened the door, I saw a white envelope slipped under it. Inside was an invitation, opening ceremony of the neighborhood's year-end fair, elderly alone fund booth. Please, Ms. Mosey, cut the ribbon. I smiled to myself amid the smell of freshly ground coffee and texted Mrs. Ruth and Mr. Armand, I'm not cutting it alone. We all stand together. And bring ladles. The phone buzzed again. Ciro, Mom, can I come help the cafe at 2? I want to learn to make Americanos like you. I typed, yes. Bring the one-hand clock. He replied with a smiley. The door opened and the first person to walk in was Matt, holding a loaf of bread newly baked at his new job. I brought this to give, he said awkwardly. I do logistics there, but today I got to touch bread. I tore a piece, said it was good, and handed him an apron, help warm the milk. He nodded. Ciro arrived, clumsy with the measuring. I stood beside him, offering small pointers, not scolding. His first Americano was weak, the second too strong, the third just right. He sipped, frowned, then smiled. Now I know why you like this drink. Because it's straight, I said. Because it doesn't hide. He nodded, wiped the counter, and flipped the open sign outward. Sunlight ran along the letter M like a guideline. And the story? It isn't over. There will still be mornings when cloud cries hoarse, orders that leave us winded, bills arriving without warning, people who need dinner, screws that must be tightened on the signboard, string lights that need bulbs, and frank but warm conversations. There will also be slow and sure changes, a savings balance thickening each month, a small vase placed just right, a glittery offer declined, an unprompted admission of fault. We are not seeking a finale with fireworks. We choose pages with even ink. And if one page smudges, we know to wait for the ink to dry and turn it. Outside, the wind still changes direction and the clouds still drift. Inside, the kettle still whistles on time, and someone knocks with 2 familiar beats, the rhythm of a person who has learned to use their own hands to open the next decent thing. On the afternoon of the year-end fair, a light breeze and sunshine sprinkled powdered sugar onto the cobblestones. I stepped onto a small wooden platform with Mrs. Ruth and Mr. Armand, pulled the red ribbon taut between 2 wooden posts and cut it clean in one stroke, and the applause rose just enough, no louder than my steady heartbeat. The stalls opened like new pages, the elderly alone fund selling hot soup and Ciro's almond cookies, Dima's shop displaying, just enough, vases on low shelves, children running circles along the string lights, Cloud sleeping soundly in her stroller under a thin wool blanket, occasionally sniffling as if dreaming of a field full of laughter. Claudia stood beside me, not pushing to the center, only handing me a paper cup printed with the word, "Thank you," a simple phrase I had spent a lifetime looping around to hold firmly again. When the sun dipped along the roofline, Ciro asked for a few minutes of quiet, then read the 4 lines